So it's become very customary in the culture for right after Halloween for people to start singing Happy Holidays, Whoop-de-doo, and Dickory-Dock, the Andy Williams. And it's different in the church, though, right? Because for us, after Thanksgiving, we start to enter into the season of Advent. Yep. And it's a totally different disposition, right?
Yeah, well, especially in the East, as you know, their Advent, their little Lent starts in November. And they go through
November 15th,
right? Yeah, so the Advent as we know it, kind of the 4 Sundays of Advent, the penitential season, the first Sunday of Advent being the first day of the liturgical year, all that begins to be set in place with Pope Gregory the Great in the early 7th century. But that Advent wasn't always there in the earliest centuries, right? So we kind of have to think about, well, how did the penitential season of Advent start?
Where did it come from? Yeah.
And what it looks like is that actually it had to do with Epiphany on January 6th. Mm-hmm. So in the whole rest of the church outside of Rome, the earliest Christians celebrate January 6th as the Nativity of Christ. But it's important because they also celebrated that as the feast day of the baptism of Christ. Yeah. Which, you see where I'm going, tells us that early Christians were baptizing and initiating people on January 6th on Epiphany.
Yeah, and there's set days in the liturgical year for Christianity where it's sort of like a high time for baptism, so you have Easter, the Easter Vigil, that's a big one. That's why you have so many baptisms. You have like All Saints Day is a big one. But of course, the Feast of Epiphany was a time when people got baptized. And as early as the 1st century, you have in the Didache a reference to the catechumens being required to fast before they would be baptized. And it became customary for the church community to fast with the catechumens.
To join with
so
them.
That's where we sort of get, because they were baptized on the Passover, on Easter. That's why you start to see this season of Lent crop up, right? And then from there, you have other penitential seasons.
And Advent takes on that same character then because of Epiphany. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't explain kind of fully the West, right? You have a few weeks before Epiphany, 3 to 4 weeks before Epiphany, where people are penitential and praying and fasting and all those things. Kind of leaks into the Western Christmas date, which is December 25th. Mm-hmm. So how do we get kind of the fuller season of Advent in the West? And the answer to that is there's a very important document called the Chronograph of 354. It's an ancient calendar, basically. And on that calendar from the 4th century, it lists the Nativity of Christ as the beginning of the year first, right? Mm-hmm. And then it ends with that. So what that tells us is that the early Christians in Rome were celebrating Christmas as the first day of the liturgical year.
Like the beginning of the year.
The beginning of the year was December 25th, not January 1st.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Liturgically speaking. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, that means that the earliest Christians saw November, December as the end of the year.
The end,
right? Or, quote unquote, the end times. So the earliest Christians saw November, December as the end times. And what do you do if the end times are coming? What do you do if the second coming is happening?
Yeah.
Right? You're vigilant, you're praying, you're fasting, there's abstinence, all those things. You're readying yourself for the second coming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because like comparing this to a Lent season, right? Because in the East, they have what, they call this the winter Pascha, and the whole idea, even it shows up in their iconography, right? That this is a winter Easter in a way, because in the iconography, we're used to seeing like a wooden stable, For them, they have it as a cave, almost like the tomb, like right? And then the Christ child isn't wrapped in sort of the swaddling cloths that you'd expect. Yeah. He's wrapped in burial cloths.
Like mummified almost.
Yeah, sort of reminding us too that there is this solemnness to the occasion as well, because Jesus ultimately is coming to die. You see it in the icon of St. Mary of Perpetual Help, where the Christ child is holding on to Mary, but he's looking at an angel bearing the cross, right? Because ultimately this is about getting us to the cross.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of explains then the penitential atmosphere of Advent.
Yeah.
And why, when we go to Mass on the first Sunday of Advent, we hear about the end times.
Yeah. It's so strange. You're driving to church during the season. They have on the radio, they have Christmas tunes and stuff. You come in and they're like, and then the priest is like, be sober, watch, be vigilant, the end times.
Because this was liturgically the end times, the time we wait. Yeah. And kind of we wait for Christ's coming, the second coming. And then if he's born, then we go through the year again.
Yeah. So it's like we're waiting for the end times. If he doesn't come in his second coming in glory, well, let's start over again. Let's go through the birth. Let's go through the ministry. Let's go through the death and resurrection again.
Yeah, but Advent and Lent, we're comparing them a little bit, but there are differences to the two.
Yeah, right. There's a difference in like disposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And the liturgy for that signals to us about that, right? So the Gloria is omitted in Advent, just like it is in Lent. However, the Alleluia is retained. We still sing the Alleluia for the gospel reading, whereas both are taken out during the Lenten season.
Right.
Okay, so Advent is kind of a mixed season. I kind of view Lent as the season of the theological virtue of faith, right? We have a steadfastness of faith and trust that God's going to pull us through. Whatever's happening, God's going to pull us through. For Advent, the theological virtue that is emphasized is actually hope.
Right.
And it's a fearful hope, a penitential hope, that we will indeed see Christ.
So a good way to think about the difference in the type of penance that we do in Lent and Advent, is really what kind of a penance would be going on, if you were going with Christ to the cross. You're waiting for that moment. You're going out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to do battle with the devil and to hold firm to the faith, right? So that's that kind of penance for Lent. For Advent, it's more, what kind of a penance would you have waiting for the Lord to come, and that's why you're saying it's this sort of hopefulness, but fearful hopefulness.
Yeah,
right?
There's a mixed emotion
that
there.
You'll almost, when you say like literally, like, Lord, like, have mercy on me, like really have mercy, because it's almost as if He's coming as a judge, rightfully as a king in His kingdom.
But we want that,
right?
Which is why you see the joyful elements put into the season of Advent.
So we glory in it,
right? We don't fast for 40 days like we do during Lent. We fast intermittently. Usually, traditionally, it was Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. During the Amber Days, after the third Sunday of Advent, you fast Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not all the time; it's intermittent.
Yeah, and it's hopeful, especially for the Christian. The baptized Christian, the one who's putting their trust in the Lord. It's a fearful expectation of judgment in a way for those who don't. So that's sort of, it really encapsulates this very well. It's actually in the popular hymn "O Holy Night," right? Because the writer in that song uses this word that's so beautifully. He says the word pining. So he's in sin and error pining. Long lay the world in sin and error pining. What's great about that is that pining has two definitions. It can either be referring to the sin and the error, pining as in devolving into sin and error, but pining also has this other definition that is longing and expecting and hoping and yearning for something.
Yeah.
And so in that one word, the writer of that song was able to encapsulate the two movements of Advent. Where you have the world, the ones who don't have hope, who don't have Christ, are just devolving into sin and error. Those who have Christ are hoping and yearning and expecting, almost like Israel's expectation of the Lord coming and the church's expectation of the Lord's second coming.
Yeah, and it speaks to kind of how I usually kind of think about both seasons. Lent is really about kind of Simon of Cyrene, right? You're carrying the cross of Christ with Him. It's about reparation. For Advent, it's that pining. It's the Magi. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So both are. It's about vigilance instead of both are sacrificing. They're giving up things, right? Simon of Cyrene has to go and carry the cross for Jesus.
Literally.
The Magi have to sacrifice their goods, travel all this journey, but the sacrifices are different, right? But
they're bringing
both
gifts.
there.
They're bringing gifts to a king, right? So maybe what are some good things to do in the home, right, for Catholics and Christians during the Advent season to really take in the meaning of the season, right?
I would say right off the bat, personally, I like to hold a lot of the joyful hymns. Some of the hymns I really like "O Holy Night," actually. I kind of hold off on listening to those until later in Advent.
Keep the joyfuls for after.
Yeah, exactly. The great thing that I'll say is practice the Divine Office, the Liturgy of the Hours. Pray the Liturgy Hours. We both love that volume.
The Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
The Little Office of the Blessed Virgin Mary is this great little volume made for Advent to say evening and morning prayer, all the prayers, all the hours. Actually.
It's great, especially for a beginner. See, I feel like the Liturgy of the Hours can be a little bit tough because you have to flip between this, go to the readings. The great thing about that little volume is that it's just consecutive. It's
every
straight
Catholic should
through.
have
Just turn the page and keep going, and you pray each office. It has all the offices in there. It's such a beautiful volume.
Yeah. And then I would say, recognize the fasting days, the abstinence days.
Yeah, participate in them. Yeah,
participate in them. The Wednesdays and Fridays at least. Abstain from something or give up something, just like in Lent.
And remember that your Eastern brethren are during this time abstaining from meat, dairy, fish with vertebrae. I mean, they're abstaining so you can pick up at least some of the Western fasting practices, and especially celebrate the 12 days of Christmas. People don't realize this, but Christmas begins on December 25th, but it doesn't end there, right? It goes on for another 12 days going
that
up to
horrible
Epiphany.
Song that we all listen to is 12 Days of Christmas.
That nobody knows what it means. But even, you've pointed out before too that, it takes us all the way to February.
Yeah.
Right?
Christmas doesn't actually officially end until February 2nd, Candlemas, with the purification of the Blessed Virgin in the temple.
Yeah. And that's why if you ever go to like Poland or Germany, Their Christmas season is going all the way, man. They're still celebrating Christmas all the way to February.
So be the weirdos in the neighborhood who keep their lights up, who keep their tree up. But you guys have a good tradition on
what we
Epiphany.
what we do is we stop watering the tree on Christmas and we let the tree dry out for those 12 days, and then on the Feast of Epiphany we get together with the boys and we cut down the tree and we actually take it in the backyard and have like a bonfire. We burn it. Nice. And then we bless the house with the traditional Epiphany blessing and all of that, but just to remind us that Christ has fully revealed himself to us, and the light of Christ really is shown in that.
Maybe even hold back some of the gifts for the 12 days with the kids. Give them a gift on each of those days. Maybe not all on December 25th, something like that to keep it going. But, from the Catholic Brothers, we wish all of you a happy, blessed Advent and a Merry Christmas.